Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargav, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about concerns that minority communities are raising over the bill that seeks to increase the minimum age of marriage for women. We also talk about a religious event that took place in Chhattisgarh, which was very similar to the controversial one that took place in Haridwar a few days ago. But first, we talk about Gujarat. As many as 93 Aam Aadmi Party leaders have been arrested in Ahmedabad and have spent more than a week in jail. This happened after they were protesting outside the BJP headquarters in the city. Among those arrested also include at least 10 college students. To talk about what they were protesting about and what has happened since, Indian Express's Vaibhav Jha joins us. Vaibhav, these 93 Aam Aadmi Party members who were protesting outside the BJP headquarters, what exactly had they been protesting about?
So this entire protest happened on December 28th, where a group of 500 Aam Aadmi Party workers assembled outside the BJP headquarters in Gandhinagar. The BJP office is called Sri Kamalam. So over there, basically they protested against a leak in the question paper of Gujarat Subordinate Service Selection Board exam. So this exam happened on 12th December for 186 vacancies of head clerk post, in which 88,000 aspirants had appeared. After this exam happened, a few days later, the government admitted the paper was leaked prior to the exam, and police arrested some 18 persons in this racket. So it was basically an Aam Aadmi Party whistleblower who blew the lid off the scam, claiming that the question papers were sold at somewhere between 10 to 12 lakhs to some of the aspirants just one day before the exam. So these Aam Aadmi Party workers had assembled outside the BJP headquarters, protesting against the question paper leak because this was the fourth such government exam in which there was a leak in the question paper since 2018.
And who all were present for this protest, and how long did this protest last for?
So basically what happened, there were over 500 workers of Aam Aadmi Party who had come from different cities such as Ahmedabad, Surat, Vadodara to protest outside BJP headquarters. That included its top leadership, including State President Gopal Italia, senior leaders from Delhi, who were protesting over there. The protest lasted for half an hour, which soon resulted in a clash between AAP workers and BJP workers. And later, Gandhinagar police also resorted to lathi charge to disperse the protesters over there.
And now 93 Aam Aadmi Party workers, including at least 10 college students, have been put in jail. What charges have been leveled against them?
So basically, a BJP woman worker, she filed a complaint with the Gandhinagar police alleging sexual harassment charges against AAP workers. So that is the reason we are not naming this BJP woman worker. In total, 500 people have been named in the FIR, and the sections applied are 354A for sexual harassment, 355(3) for assault on public servant, 452 for house trespass, 152 for assaulting public servant while suppressing riots, rioting sections for intentional insult, and criminal conspiracy. Now, according to legal experts, all these sections, when applied with the section of criminal conspiracy, which is 120B of the Indian Penal Code, these sections amount to punishment of at least 7 years of rigorous imprisonment for the accused persons. So out of these 93 AAP members who were jailed, 28 are women, so they are not facing the sexual harassment charge, but the remaining 65 men are facing in total 22 criminal sections of the Indian Penal Code, Epidemic Diseases Act, and Prevention of Damage to Public Properties Act.
And how are these sexual harassment charges connected to the protest that took place?
So basically, when I went through the FIR states that Aam Aadmi Party workers had assembled right outside the office of the BJP in Gandhinagar and they were chanting slogans. The complainant in this FIR has claimed that when the BJP workers asked the Aam Aadmi Party workers to back off, they breached the party headquarters and then they misbehaved with the women BJP workers present over there. And the complainant has also accused one senior Aam Aadmi Party leader, Mr. Ishudan Gadvi, of being drunk and misbehaving with them. The police, on their part, are saying that they are investigating all angles in this case, and this is where the sexual harassment part comes in the entire protest. But basically, the Aam Aadmi Party workers were protesting, demanding resignation of Mr. Asit Vora, who is the chairman of Gujarat Subordinate Service Selection Board. Now, under Mr. Vora's tenure, at least 3 of the question papers of government recruitment exams have been leaked since 2018. And in total, 4 such leaks have happened regarding government exams in Gujarat. So, Aam Aadmi Party workers are saying that since Mr. Vora has also been a BJP leader, they have been demanding his resignation, seeking transparency in the system.
And so now, what exactly has been the reaction of the Aam Aadmi Party and the opposition parties in the state to these arrests?
So, a day after 93 members were jailed, Aam Aadmi Party MLA Mr. Gulab Singh Yadav from Delhi, he flew from Delhi to Ahmedabad, and he basically criticized the BJP for lodging such harsh sections against an opposition party which has been protesting outside their headquarters. And as of now, Mr. Gulab Singh Yadav has decided to sit on an indefinite fast at the Aam Aadmi Party headquarters in Ahmedabad, along with another senior leader of Gujarat. But the Delhi CM, Mr. Arvind Kejriwal, has also tweeted in support of his workers who have been jailed in Sabarmati Central Prison. And we haven't seen much of a reaction from the state Congress party, except senior leader Mr. Paresh Dhanani, who visited Aam Aadmi Party workers yesterday, and he lent out his support. But as of now, there hasn't been much support from Congress on this issue.
And this entire matter obviously seems very political. So could you give a sense of the kind of rivalry that the Aam Aadmi Party and the BJP share in the state?
So since its inception in 2013-14, the Aam Aadmi Party had a very minuscule presence in Gujarat. But things changed since 2020 when Aam Aadmi Party senior leaders from Delhi came to Gujarat and they announced that they are going to contest on all seats in the local municipality corporation elections in Gujarat, and they're going to contest all seats in the upcoming Vidhan Sabha elections of 2022. So in the local municipality polls which happened in February this year, Aam Aadmi Party managed to win 27 seats in Surat, and it basically decimated Congress in Surat municipality corporations, posing a great challenge to the BJP. The BJP, of course, is the winner, but the BJP has now a new opposition in Surat municipality corporation elections. Similarly, Aam Aadmi Party has been trying to gain hold in be it metropolitan cities or the rural belts of Gujarat, because what they have been claiming is that for the past 25 years, BJP has been in power in Gujarat, which has allegedly made Congress as an opposition complacent. So Aam Aadmi Party, with its new team of youngsters, they are trying to pose a new challenge to both BJP and Congress in Gujarat. And both the principal opposition Congress and the majority BJP look at Aam Aadmi Party as a serious threat before the 2022 Vidhan Sabha elections.
And next we talk about the Prohibition of Child Marriage Amendment Bill 2021. This bill, which was introduced in the Lok Sabha earlier this month, seeks to increase the age of marriage for women. From 18 years, it proposes to make it 21 years. This would then make the minimum age of marriage the same for both men and women. In a previous podcast episode, we had talked about how many experts are criticizing this bill because they are saying that this would not actually help reduce child marriages, and that it could in fact lead to targeting of minority communities. They instead suggest that the government should focus more on increasing education among women and reducing poverty, since these are the factors that have helped reduce child marriages in the past. Now, since this bill was proposed, most minority communities have not really spoken against raising the age of marriage, but they have expressed concerns that this law would override their personal laws, and this is something they're not comfortable with. In this segment, we talk to Apurva Vishwanath, who writes on law for the newspaper, about how this proposed bill will affect personal laws and the concerns it raises. Apurva, before we begin, could you remind our listeners what exactly personal laws are and how do they differ from other laws that apply to everyone?
So when we refer to personal laws, what we mean is the specific laws that apply to a certain religion, a certain faith, or even a particular culture. So it can be region specific, it can be religion specific. Post independence, what we did was to bring in these religious, cultural laws, and even some practices which may not have been codified before. So, to bring in these practices, codify them, and give it the legitimacy of law. One big example of that is the Hindu code. So, you have the Hindu Marriage Act and Hindu laws on succession, adoption. These are varying practices that are followed differently in different regions across the country. So, you have different schools of Hinduism. So, there was an attempt to codify this, bring harmony into all of these different practices, and call them personal laws. So, they apply to Hindus specifically on these aspects. And what aspects are these? These are mostly issues governing personal lives of people, as we can call it, like be it marriage, divorce, adoption, succession. So these customs and religious practices codified into law are what we refer to as personal laws.
Okay, so like you mentioned, different religions would have different personal laws. Like for marriage, Hindus have the Hindu Marriage Act. For Christians, there is the Indian Christian Marriage Act. And for Muslims, there is the Sharia law. So when we talk about this draft bill that seeks to raise the legal age of marriage for women, and it's seeking to do that across the board, so how will this proposed law affect these existing personal laws?
So, one law that actually talked about the age of marriage, apart from these personal laws, because personal laws each have their own definition of what is the legal age for marriage or what are the legal qualifications for marriage. So, the specific law that did that, or the secular law which did that, is the Prevention of Child Marriage Act. So, the Prevention of Child Marriage Act basically says that any marriage of a girl below the age of 18 years and a boy below the age of 21 years will be deemed a child marriage. So, this specific law is what is being sought to amended when the government is talking about raising the minimum age of marriage. So, what the government will now do is the parliament will bring in an amendment to the Prevention of Child Marriage Act and say that the minimum age of marriage will now be 21 for both men and women, which means any marriage of two people who are below the age of 21 will be deemed a child marriage. But since different personal laws have different criteria for this, so how the bill is trying to rationalize this or bring everything under one umbrella is by adding a notwithstanding clause, what in legal terms, which says that this specific law will trump all other existing legislation on this subject. So, in the Prevention of Child Marriage Act, there is now going to be a clause which will say that the Prevention of Child Marriage Act will apply over this specific personal laws. For example, the Hindu Marriage Act says the minimum age of marriage is 18 for a woman. The Sharia Act actually says it is on attaining puberty, and 15 years is deemed as the age at which a girl attains puberty. So all of these will not be applicable over the Prevention of Child Marriage Act.
Now, this is something that minority communities have raised concerns about, like they don't want this law to trump personal laws. And one of the things they point to is that personal laws have protection under the Constitution. So if that's the case, what challenges will this proposed law face?
No, absolutely. Personal laws have sanction in law. They are all legislation, so they don't apply as mere customs. One of the reasons why personal laws were codified and made into legislations are because to give them this legal sanction, right? Legal protection. However, the Constitution, while it allows every individual to follow his faith or religion under Article 25 of the Constitution, it also says that all fundamental rights are subject to certain conditions. And public health and morality, these are all certain restrictions that weigh on fundamental rights. So the parliament is saying that reasons, like, for example, public health is one of the reasons that the bill cites to increase the age of marriage for women. It says that this will prevent teen pregnancies, this will improve health of females. So these issues taken into account. The parliament is making a claim that the fundamental right to practice your faith or religion can be subject to certain conditions. This has happened before. Hindu marriage, actually, if you go by scriptures and traditional practices, there is no minimum age of marriage in Hindu practice generally. So it was only through a legislation, a social reform that brought in a minimum age of marriage. Child marriage was very well accepted under Hindu religion. So the Sharda Act first came in, set a minimum age of marriage for women for the first time, which was then progressively changed and kept on increasing to the 18 years that we now know. Similarly, polygamy was something that was permitted under Hindu religious practice. That again, through a legislation, was changed. Polygamy was outlawed. So there have been several instances where personal laws have been cut to size for the sake of introducing a specific legislation for pushing a social change in the country.
Okay, so right now you gave some examples of the changes that we have seen in the Hindu personal laws. Could you give some examples from the Muslim personal laws as well?
So instant triple talaq is a practice that is recognized by Sharia. And this was one of the key arguments that the Muslim side presented in the Supreme Court. But the court in the 2017 landmark case, Sharia Banu versus Union of India, they did hold that the practice was unconstitutional. In fact, one of the big positive reforms that came in Muslim law was also through a Supreme Court judgment in Shabana Banu versus Imran Khan, where the court said that a Muslim woman is under Sharia is actually entitled to maintenance after a divorce only during the iddat period, that is the mourning period. But the court said that as long as she does not remarry, one can actually claim for maintenance under CRPC, even after that period is completed. So that was giving rights that are outside the realm of personal law for Muslim women. So this has happened before, even with Muslim law. It is really a question of balancing of these. The court will have to look at what is the intent of the specific legislation and does it serve that purpose. And if the court is convinced that the intent of the legislation serves the purpose, the purpose of the Prevention of Child Marriage Act is actually to curb instances of child marriage in India. So by raising the legal age of marriage, is the legislation able to achieve that? That will be the test before a court. And if the court is convinced that that can happen, then personal laws to this extent can be override.
And Apurva, what do we know about the extent to which this proposed law will actually help curbing child marriages?
So, despite being a special legislation, one of the issues that legal experts and child rights activists have always highlighted about the Prevention of Child Marriage Act is that it does not really outlaw or make child marriages illegal. It says child marriages will not be recognized unlawful. It gives rights to the parties to the marriage who are minors at the time of marriage to choose whether they want to continue in this marriage or not. So one thing that this raising of age does again is, although it is not illegal to have a child marriage, it does put the family or participants in the wedding, everybody under a cloud of illegality. What I mean by that is the Prevention of Child Marriage Act prescribes a punishment, a jail term up to 2 years for participating in a wedding like that. Even the caterer, the photographer, anybody who participates in such a wedding can be booked under the law. This is apart from the parents, the religious people who facilitate the wedding. So all of them can be brought under the law. So if a child marriage is in itself not illegal, then does this bring an added shadow of criminality is something that experts have been talking about.
Right. The fact that this proposed law could actually make it easier for minority communities to be targeted.
Yeah. So this is one of the fears that have been expressed right now, that this is another law that can be used to weaponize against minorities.
And in the end, we talk about a hate-filled event. Earlier this month, a controversial religious event took place in the city of Haridwar. During this event, calls were made to target the Muslim community. This had also included calls for a genocide. This event had grabbed national headlines, also because no police action was taken in the matter. But now, another such event has taken place in Chhattisgarh, where similar hate speeches were made targeting the minority communities. To talk about this, joining us is Gargi Verma, who reports on Chhattisgarh for the Indian Express. So Gargi, what was the purpose of this event and who was it organized by?
A 2-day Dharam Sansad was organized in Chhattisgarh's capital city Raipur on December 25th and 26th. This event was organized primarily by a private NGO called Neelkant Seva Sansthan, and it was supported by Hindu organizations across the state. The Dharam Sansad was convened by Mahant Ram Sundar Das, who's the Chhattisgarh Gau Seva Ayog chief and also the head of a prominent mutt in Chhattisgarh called the Dudhadhari Mutt. The event was basically to bring all seers from across the country to Raipur to have a constructive discussion. However, much like what happened in Haridwar a couple of weeks ago, the conversation was derailed by hate speech and controversial comments made by these seers.
And what kind of things did we hear in this event?
Most of the seers that had joined at the Dharam Sansad seemed to have a belief that the followers of Islam were the biggest threat to the country and the Hindus of the country. Comments about being armed to their teeth were made. Comments about how Muslims need to be culled and controlled were made. One seer called Triveni Das, who's from Chhattisgarh, made a statement that missionaries and Christians make the weapon, whereas the Muslims use those weapons to create discord in the world. There were comments made on female freedom. There was one Sadhri present whose name was Vibha, and she said that girls, when they are found doing something like wearing short clothes or smoking or drinking outside by people from the same community, those girls should be beaten up along with their parents for defiling the culture.
माता पिता उसे हॉस्टल में भर्ती करता है, 3,000 रुपए महीना उसको देता है, 2,000 रुपए खर्चे के लिए देता है, तो सूट सलवार पहनकर 15 दिन जाती है. फिर धीरे धीरे उसके बॉयफ्रेंड बनने लगते हैं और वहीं से वो कपड़े उतार कर फेंकती है और छोटे छोटे कपड़े पहन करके और बड़ी बड़ी कारों में बैठ करके चलने लगती है. एक कान के नीचे लगाओ, क्या कर रही हो तुम? ये तुम्हारा कार्य है क्या?
Comments were also made on how this country is fragmented because of the decisions taken in the past by our freedom fighters. The most controversial comment, I think, was against Mahatma Gandhi, and that was made by this sant called Kali Charan, who used expletives for Mahatma Gandhi, who abused Mahatma Gandhi, and then hailed Nathuram Godse for killing him so that he got rid of him. There were also a lot of comments made about how Hindus need to be armed against the Muslim attacks to create the Hindu Rashtra, which contains of the entire Southeast Asia. The Dharam Sansad also spoke about the religious conversions that is prominent in Chhattisgarh. So there were pledges made to bring back 1 lakh people who have allegedly changed their religion and now want to become Hindus again. Since Chhattisgarh is a tribal-dominated state, there were also a lot of conversations about tribals not willing to consider themselves as Hindu. The seers, along with the political representatives who were present in the event, said that the Adivasis are Hindu and they are being misguided by Christians into converting. Basically, it was a lot of misinformation and a lot of animosity towards religious minorities, which was the primary theme of the event.
And apart from these hateful and communal speeches, was there anything else that was similar in nature to the Haridwar event?
One of the attendees of the Haridwar meet, in fact, somebody who had made controversial statements in Haridwar and had been in the news recently, Swami Prabodhanand, he was here and he stands by whatever he said in Haridwar. And he repeated it, saying that to make India Hindu Rashtra or to establish Hindu Rashtra, we need to end Muslims across the country.
And also, how many people attended this event?
There were more than 20 seers who had come to attend the function and who spoke. And more than 100 people attended the 2-day event.
And these kind of speeches, this kind of rhetoric, how unusual is it for something like this to happen in Chhattisgarh?
It is very unusual to have something like this event in Chhattisgarh. Even when the BJP was ruling the state for 15 years, religious conversion between Adivasi conversions to Christianity were the only religious issues that were raised in the state. There was never any communal discord. There were never any communal tensions even until Kavardha a few months ago, where 2 groups sort of had an altercation over flags. So this seems like a very honest effort to set communalistic divisions in a society that doesn't really have these divisions already.
And what have been the political reactions to this event so far?
After the comments were made against Mahatma Gandhi and some local media reported about it, late at night after the seers had left and the event had ended, the ex-mayor and chairperson of Raipur Municipal Corporation, he went to the police station to register an FIR against Kali Charan for using expletives against Mahatma Gandhi. The state Congress chief, Mohan Markam, also approached the police to register a complaint later at night. The BJP has in fact come out stating that if such an event should not have been organized, people should have stayed away from an event like this. But once this event was organized, they should have been careful about what was allowed to be said and what discussion was to be done. The BJP is claiming that the Congress is now making a huge hue and cry over it, whereas there is nothing to do about it because the person who had expressed his views has already expressed his views and left the state.
You were listening to Three Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.